Greetings, folks. This is Haji once again from beyondarchitecturehaji.com. And as part of our series into the design process, this is the third in the series. Here in this series, we would like to talk about the design process and which involves the site, the building, the structure, and then parallelly we have to find out for whom we are designing and how to go about considering the most important factor, which is the human factor in these drawings. Talking about design elements and design principles along the way, which are also very important. We will go into detail, and those things require a little bit of drawing. I have to illustrate, so not to delay very much, let's get down to it, and I'm going to switch the camera on the other side and we continue from there on. Good evening, folks. It is Haji here from beyondarchitecturehaji.com, and this is in continuation of the design process. After the drawing exercises, you may indulge in some of this. Now we will talk about the design process, the evolution of design. For that you will require to have some knowledge and some idea of what I am talking about. We are talking about very finer electromagnetic energies that is emitted throughout the universe, including our bodies, and all things do emit electromagnetic energy. And we are basically dealing with those kinds of energies. Therefore, as a prerequisite, it would be quite appropriate for you to indulge in the sonic geometry, the science of water, design and numbers, and some other articles. They are to be found, the written matter, readings are in categories, and the photos, the images are in the gallery. Parallelly, you can check them out. Please have an idea, and then we'll jump into the design process. Like doctors, like any other professionals, we also have to design something for somebody, and that we must have a very clear-cut goal and purpose of doing that. And we are no less than doctors. We can also think of the health and well-being for now and hereafter of the client, whomever it may be. It is with this good intention that we should begin the process of design. This should be in our hearts. I do not want to delve beyond into consciousness and other stuff, but again, you begin the whole thing with very good intentions. For his health and well-being, we are no less than doctors, like I said, and we also deal with a much larger space and time of the client than a doctor. So, health and well-being for now and hereafter should be the goal of anybody doing anything for humans. Now, we come to the problem of the site, and then we will deal with the building and then the client. Now, you see, we derive some energy from in this world. So let's take the building first. Here we can say evolution of form. Form. So we derive our energy from the sun, goes on to make energy, goes on to bring in a thought or intuition. Because of that energy, you are able to think. So, into thought, intuition. Once you have a thought, you intend to do something, your intention, your niyat, जिसको बोलते हैं, intention. What should be your intention? The health and well-being of my client, good intentions, and design a good house for him so that he is happy. Then this intention brings you to the level of consciousness. Consciousness is against the energy that is emitted. It's coming out of you and it's going someplace. These kinds of things that when they happen, they they create vibrations within each cells in the body, smallest particle in the body, smallest cell in the body. It has electricity. The body's electricity is charged by salt in the cells. And doctors tell us not to have salt. So we have, and that creates vibrations. From vibrations, these vibrations occur at certain frequencies. And because of frequency, you have resonance, echo. Beyond that, because of resonance and these vibrations and frequencies, say if you run them for you to observe how it is, it definitely create patterns. If you run them through, say, water or sand, this is in brackets, you're talking about the science of cymatics. They do create patterns. This frequency, these vibrations, when you run it through anything, through any medium, air, so they create patterns. So the next thing we have is patterns. Or some sort of a shape, 2D. 2D. From pattern, form evolves, which is 3D. So thus we can see that from the basic energy that we derive from the sun, slowly that becomes an intention, a consciousness, a vibration, and it converts it into form. Similarly, form again can create vibrations and lead you to your consciousness. The same process can go in reverse, like a feedback loop. If you look at a pattern, if you look at a form, then it affects you mentally, and you begin to think something when you look at specific forms and specific patterns. So now, in addition to this, it would be wise for us to get involved with the study in geometry, wherein you study different shapes and their resonant frequencies. Those resonant frequency of a square or a rectangle is the sum total of these angles, which is 360. For a circle, it is 360. For a pentagon, it is 540. So basically it's the sum total of it. For a triangle, it is the sum total of these three angles, which is 180. Then you have, say for example, a pyramid. Pyramids are slightly different. The frequency of any pyramid is equal to frequency is equal to the angle of the pyramid. So that's how it works. You need to get involved with these kinds of resonant frequencies of these shapes and these forms. And again, you will have to get involved with some study of patterns, which patterns generate what kind of a frequency, and what kind of a feeling, the thought they invoke in you. If you look at some of the ancient temple jalis, temple sculptures, the jalis, which is grills, the detailing, the abstraction, how they have abstracted a lotus or an elephant, right? So we are looking at so many things, and we are basically looking at patterns. It could be floral or geometric, right? Apart from temples, please look at some Islamic, grills and jalis and patterns, which are geometric patterns, I should say. Geometric as well as floral, geometric as well as floral patterns. You can look at, the Persians, the Mughals. Mughals means specifically you can look at Sikandra. Sikandra is Akbar's tomb. Right? You can look at Turkish, and so on and so forth. And again, this I'm sure this will be in churches and other Western, buildings as well, that you have they have used these jalis and patterns very effectively, and even today these symbols are very much used by corporate houses, in their logos, in the company logos, in the automobile logos. You can see that they have these kinds of symbols, jalis, patterns, symbols, symbolism, symbology. Please study all of that. So this was, apart from this, now you've studied a little bit of geometry, pattern, from pattern 2D now to 3D. In addition to this, a small peek into Vastu Shastra will also enlighten you with the basic requirements to tune with universal frequencies. So this you have to do, go and refer Vastu Shastra also here. Now, apart from this, let's look at design rules and design tools, techniques, in other words, design principles. Design principles are the rules of design. If you break down design and you take it apart, you will see these things, these smaller things. This is very much part of the study in art appreciation, where you break down the entire painting or a sculpture or a piece of art into its various categories of technique and presentation. And even Indian Bharat Nritya Shastra is one ancient Indian document, Nritya Shastra, where there are Nritya, Nritya Shastra, where they have 18 different kinds of design rules or criteria. Similarly, in schools and colleges these days, we talk about design principles. And let us see what do they actually mean. The first one as a design principle, when you look at any piece of art, architecture, is it must have a focus, a sub-focus. By that I mean, now here is where we have to go a little bit visual, and this is your sheet of paper, and of course, as a rule, I would like to use the 1/3 rule or the golden ratio. You know, the golden ratio is 1 is to 1.618, whereas the 1/3 rule is, you know, the 1/3 rule, you divide the sheet into 1/3 this way and 1/3 that way, and they say the points of interest lie somewhere along these points and never the center. Why never the center? We have to draw and see it. You draw another thing and you have this 1/3 rule thing, and you put a circle right in the middle of it. You know, this makes it very static. This is used for shooting practice as a bullseye. Any object that you place in the middle will become very static, very fixed to your eye, and that is why they use it for target practice. But in art, architecture, we want it a little bit more dynamic. Okay, we want dynamic. It has to have some movement. It has to have some movement. So we go and place it somewhere here along that place, and we say, okay, 1/3. But as you can see, this little fellow has become very lonely. You know, only one little thing hanging in space, definitely it will need, this is called a focus. So definitely it will need a partner. And if we create a partner for it, and definitely not the same size, because they will start competing with each other. So there is a concept called hierarchy. Hierarchy, I will write it here. This is also a design principle, small and big. So therefore, there is something smaller. And as a rule, the smaller the area, you can make it more dark. So as you can see now, there is some interplay between these two figures in the middle of a sheet, right? So far we have achieved something dynamic. There is some movement between the two, it jumps between the two, and also there is hierarchy. We do not want anything static. So therefore, any focus, by the way, this is called the sub-focus. So anytime you design a facade, a building, a setting, there you are thinking about this thing. Not only here I'm showing it to you in 2 dimensions, but you have to think about it in 3 dimensions. Next is our sub-focus, scale. Let's write scale. Scale. This one is the measuring scale. The other is, the rulers. That is not what we are talking about. We are not talking about any type of a scale that, in reduction or, increasing in size. We are not talking about the scale. The scale here means size of the structure or building versus a human. A human in terms of size. For example, I draw 2 similar, say, entrance ways, and Pardon me, this is all time consuming because without graphics nothing works. These are two entrance ways. Okay. Now, in one of them, I will go and place a human figure there, but in another one, I'll place it there. Now, do you see the difference? This will tell you that this arch is very, very large. And this tells you this is just maybe about 6-7 feet. So this is what we mean by scale in design. So whenever you involve yourself designing something, have a focus, sub-focus. Do involve scale. What scale you are designing? Scale, if you go to a small village here, it's very small houses, small shops, everything. You say the scale is very small. You go to a larger city, go to New York, large cities, you can't even look at the tops because you feel so guilty and you feel so bad because the scale is humongous. It is not to human scale, this is said. What is to human scale is the space that you feel comfortable within. So if you are designing a primary school, small children, a lower roof will do for them to make feel cozy perhaps. Do some research. If it is a concert hall, you will require a larger thing. So, based on that, you will have to control the space, the volume of space in relation to the resonant frequency. If you go to Golconda Fort, Hyderabad, in one of the tombs and the mosque, there is a system of echo built into these structures. Okay? Now these are loud. We here are talking about things that we cannot hear or see, those very, very subtle frequencies. So this is what we mean by the resonant frequency, whether it is good for your client or bad for your client. You must look at that. The third is proportion, the most important all. Proportions are universal in nature. Like I talked about the 1/3 rule over here, if you remember, dividing the page into 1/3. So, in terms of proportion, you have the 1/3 rule, then you have the golden ratio, which is 1:1.618. Then you have the Fibonacci series, okay, wherein the numbers are 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, and so on and so forth, 55, 89, and so on and so forth. So now, these are universal in nature. This golden ratio, you will find it right from your DNA to the structure of your body, to the structure of all living organisms, all living things, and in trees, in bushes, in anything you pick up, you will find this. It is in your DNA, it is in everything. This proportion is universal, and it is universal, and the frequency that these generate they are very harmonious frequencies. Proper proportions. What are those proportions that generate these harmonious frequencies? Now, if you have seen Charminar or any old structure, the repetition, for example, is what determines the proportion. Maybe this is Charminar, Okay, I am drawing a quick one here. Hey, this is a structure which has got a very large arch in the middle. Okay, and then there are arches here. There are arches, the large ones here, smaller here, further smaller here, and very, very small ones here, very, very small ones here. So if you look at Charminar, there are the same arch, which is the Indo-Saracenic arch, repeated in different proportions. In other words, the proportions are the same, proportions same, only sizes are different. This is larger than this, and so on and so forth. So this is what we mean by proportions. Now in these proportions there are harmonic proportions and there are disharmonic proportions. We try to create harmonic proportions which suit the body and do not create disharmonic proportions. Vastu Shastra is one guide for you. The other guide is all of these three things that I have written down here. Basically, the Fibonacci series, the golden ratio, the 1/3 rule, and so on and so forth. They are all talking about universal designs, harmonious designs that are fixed. Okay? You just simply cannot go and create something disharmonious and say, I like it that way, and so on and so forth. Because that will create perhaps disharmony in your body or the occupant. Finally, it is for the person you are talking about. Whether it's a workplace, whether it's a residence, whether it's a discotheque or a shopping center or a mall. What kind of resonance frequencies you would like to bring about through the proportions? What kind of proportions would you like to maintain? For example, the Turks, Turkish fellows, the proportions that they use for Alhambra, for example, they took one square, okay, and then they took a compass and then they did that. Okay, this is the arc of the compass. So they get the bases are the same size. Then you get the next thing here. Then they took this again as the center and they drew an arc, and this gave them the next thing. Mind you, the bases are all the same size. Okay. Then they took this and did that, and you do get the fourth one. Okay. And by the way, these diagonals are, if you know a little bit of mathematics, this is pi 2, root 2, root 2, root 3, root 4, root 5. And if you want to see the entrance of the Alhambra, one of the entrances that they have made is they took this basic facade in some base that they have calculated. They took this as the center, and then they drew an arc that gave them that. Okay? Now they took that as with a compass and drew an arc this way. Okay? So now you got another one here. And this is exactly how the entrance to the Alhambra is. And whatever kind of arch is there, I don't remember. There is an arch in the middle here. So that is how proportions work. So you can look at some proportions here and there, and how they have manipulated proportions. And the proportion is one thing that binds the entire design together. It's like a belt which wraps up the entire design, you know. So this is as much as proportion is concerned. Yep. Now, next we can talk about, say, balance. Balance consists of two parts. One is the symmetrical balance. The other one is asymmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance, of course, most of us are familiar, and both are familiar, but as a matter of demonstration, you have a structure, you have an arch here, and you have an arch here, you have a window here, you have a window here, you have this here, you have this here, you have that here, you have that here, and then you have something in the middle, all of that. Then you have a jali here, you have a jali here. See, now if you take this as the axis, it divides up evenly. This is called as symmetrical balance. All of these rules you must choose from. You must decide what proportion you're going to work with in your design. Which proportion? 1:3:5, 3:5:9, 5:3:9:13. Odd numbers are better. They are to be abundantly found in nature. In nature, flowers, everything you have in 3s and 5s, and the petals and the leaves in 3s and 5s, and mostly in odd numbers, not even numbers. Very, very, very few. Rarely you will find something in even numbers. So odd numbers are nicer. Odd proportions, for that matter. Now, let's talk about asymmetry in design, which basically is, asymmetry again, you may want to look at Alhambra. It's very much balanced in asymmetry. But asymmetry is, you are balancing, asymmetry is equal to a visual balance. In other words, maybe you have again a building here, okay, and then this building is this way. Now, if you do something to this, the entire focus tends to shift on this, and this becomes very, very, very light, and this from the middle, if you see it, it is sort of off balance. So we have to create something heavy in this side visually, so that it will take up the weight of this on this other side, and it is directly proportional in a way. So maybe I will do that, and I can do that, okay, and add some weight to that. Still not enough. Perhaps I will add a slit here to that, this sort of here, placed that way. Somehow try to make this a little bit more weighty on this side, so that it balances this off. So now, as you can see, it is sort of being balanced because of the other features. Without these features, this would have been, very one-sided, one lopsided. Still not enough. Sometimes, even in sketching, we just do this, make it dark that side. It automatically I will go there. Now I made it a little bit too dark, so therefore I'll make this one dark a little bit. So you see how it goes. So this is asymmetrical balance. Movement if we go back to our little balloons that we drew on 1/3 initially, okay, we put one circle here and we said this is the focus, this is the sub-focus. And if you observe, again these two fellows seem to be very lonely, right? So I would like to add more sub-focuses, so to speak. Maybe a dot here, as long as it is not larger than these, and they can be in different sizes, not to compete with the main ones. Okay, now if you can see how this place is becoming busy, right? Again, there is movement here, there is many things, but there is no specific movement as such. There is hierarchy, but we need movement also. So therefore, what I do is, I normally tie it up with my border and see this goes there, comes out here. Lines. I am using a line to create movement. Now it has become something very different from the ones we started off with, the small little boxes that we had, like this one here, if you see, very lonely when compared to these little things, right? Very lonely things. It becomes very active, right? Very active. You see that here. Okay? So much for this. There is many more of these, design principles, and we can get back to it slightly later. But now, with these few, see that there is balance, there is up direction. Direction, if you have to create direction, how will you create direction? Okay? Direction is another design principle. It is very easy. Just take this and then draw an arrow from direction. Okay. Here you begin talking. You begin getting into graphic communication. Okay. I'm talking here. I am saying, what kind of a feeling do you get when you see these kinds of arrows, or for that matter, these kinds of arrows, or for that matter, I know I may have to draw another one. This kind of an arrow, they all give you different feeling, which is, you can call this harmony, togetherness. There is no thing. You can look at this and say, oh, definitely this is head-on conflict. Okay, this is opposed to each other, opposites, contradictory. So many words that you can associate with these kinds of graphics. So in any work that you do, architecture, in any design, let there be some direction to it. Just by putting some lines, it will create that. So where do you put those lines? Appropriate lines. You see, it becomes something else. So you must have direction. Now let us focus our attention upon design elements. Design elements are the tools of design. Design elements. They are the tools of design. Okay? For example, a line, a shape, a form. You can use color. You can use texture to design. Right? I can design, for example, this is a pot. Okay, with lines alone, I can, create that three-dimensionality of that pot, right? I can use a line to create a form, to create design. Use line, or for that matter, all of these, to create forms, designs. Do you understand that? Now, same thing with shape. There are so many shapes that you have. Square, rectangle, triangle, circle, and all of these polygons, pentagon, hexagon, huh? No, heptagon, octagon, octagon, heptagon, octagon, nanogon, decagon, all of those different polygons, and we did talk about trying to find out the resonant frequencies of these kinds of shapes. So you can use all of these shapes to work with whatever shape you want. I want to deal with, rectangle. You can use combinations of circles. You can use squares and, triangles are very, very, diagonal lines are very treacherous lines. So you must be very careful. For example, if you have lines are quite deadly, horizontal line, no problem. Okay, if you have vertical lines, no problem. You can have lines, no problem. But once you involve the diagonal lines, in any design, it really cancels it. It becomes the most powerful line in the whole thing. So you have to be very careful when you use what kind of lines, horizontal, vertical, diagonal line. Then curves, there are curved lines also, curved lines. Amongst curved lines, there is a saying in amongst Arabs, they say that the arch never sleeps. No, doesn't it give you that, somebody is stretching their back upwards and so on? Huh? There is a head here and there is the thing, he is doing some form of yoga. So there is some kind of a compression tension in these kinds of shapes. These shapes, as you can see, they do give you some feeling, different feeling altogether. You look at these things, these patterns. So these patterns must be controlled. What kind of, you cannot simply go and pick up any grill, any design, whatever, whatnot. So here we have lines and shapes. Same thing with forms. Like shapes, like forms. Forms. It could be, again, right from a cube, again to a rectangle, to a cone, to all of the forms that you can lay your hands on. You have to decide what kind of a form you want to deal with to begin with. Okay? Is it going to be a hexoid and those polygonal 3D compositions? So you have to determine which form you want and then go and abstract it. You can use forms in your design, manipulate it, the forms in different proportions. In the process, when you manipulate these forms, you can go through the process of, abstraction. I'll just touch upon abstraction here, and later on in another video, I will elaborate on that. See, this is a lotus. which normally we have been drawing in school, right? We were asked to draw this lotus all the time in our drawing class, and you will find this lotus. This is very common lotus. Hmm? But again, the way Kakatiyas have been able to abstract it was this. You know, if you see, look at in Kakatiya temples, they have abstracted lotuses this way. So this is the process of abstraction. So manipulate forms, for use forms to create design. It is a tool. These are all tools of design. Elements of design means tools of design. Similarly, you can use colors, different textures. Textures means, you know, it could be any texture. On a plain wall, it could be bands, it could be just circles, any texture involving, you know, the design. How would you, from a plain wall, for example, to a textured wall, to, you know, any kind of a texture that you try to derive, give to any form, you have the texture of, see, marbles and all of that. So through color, through texture, you can manipulate design. These all are tools of design that will come to your aid in trying to arrive at a proper design, very well suited to the health and happiness of your client in the frequencies that is suitable for him. Now, there are three more things that we forgot about, and that is character, and then ambiance, and repose. Character is a building which is designed to be a hospital should look like a hospital. It should not look like an apartment complex. It should not look like a commercial place. If it is an educational institution, it should look like an educational institution. Our high court looks like a high court. Okay, our university looks like a university. But many colleges these days don't have that appearance. They have lost the character. Ambiance is the mahol, the environment that you create, you know, in any restaurant that you design, places of public places, you know, what kind of an ambiance, the mahol, the environment that you create inside is very important. And lastly, repose. Repose is the attitude, you know. The building has got to have an attitude. You know, look at the opera house, you know, in Australia, opera house, you know, which goes like that, you know, like a crane, and so on and so forth. It's got an attitude. And you look at, you know, this is Australia. Then you look at, see, the Dallas airport, which is in Western Virginia, you know, it gives you the feeling of flight. You know, that has got some attitude to it. So design your must have some character, ambiance, and repose. Lastly, and the most important thing, I would like to finish it off with that, and that is that we must deal with the human element here before we get involved in anything else. And the human element are as follows. If we have the main purpose to have for the betterment of our client, his health and his welfare, then we have to know him, the client, CLIENT. For us to know anything about him, we must know his date of birth. Date of birth means day. Which is the day, the date, and the time of birth. Sorry, the day, place and time of birth, place of birth. So with these three things, if you walk into an astrologer's place, he will give you the details of this person. He will give you some statistical averages that people with these kinds of dates of birth and these stars, okay, and his zodiac, his birth stars, and they give you some statistical averages that they have this kind of a temperament and so on and so forth. You know, from there they will derive what compatible, what is the good, which stone is compatible, which metal is compatible to him, okay, which wood is compatible, which vegetation is compatible, which precious stone is compatible, ruby, sapphire, right? And what are his frequencies, his frequency, okay, the chakra frequency. And essentially, according to our Indian tradition, we divide a person into three categories: the Vat, the Pith, and the Kapha. Vat fellows have very little patience, they get upset at the drop of a hat, irritable. Pith fellows got a lot of heat, okay, anger, the sun is their star, very hot-headed, very upset, very angry people. Kapha is the type of, those fat fellows, obese fellows, very, very jovial, never get angry. They are called the elephants. And because they never get angry, very jovial, and once they get upset, you can't stop them. So, according to this and according to their temperaments, they have been divided into these categories. So, how each person has got these in different proportions. A Pith person will have more of Pith and less of Vat and Kapha. A Kapha person will have less of Pith and Vat, and the Vat person will have less of Pith and Kapha. It's like that. So there is something called a balance you have to achieve in your temperament. With this information, then you are ready to go with all of these things which are compatible, plus the frequencies that you create in these spaces. In spaces. They should match, in the sense that if a person is very slow and lazy, what frequencies would you like to have in his bedroom so that he becomes slightly active? And if he is hyperactive, how to calm him down in his own house? We are talking about periods ranging between 5 years, 7 years, 14 years, 21 years, 28 years, 35 years. You see, it's a place of residence and a place of work. So therefore, anything that you design and create, think about the resonance frequencies that you are creating, and also avoid all of these modern technological devices that go on to destroy your own vibrational frequency. With these few things, I think we can call it a day. In some other video, I will talk about the process of abstraction, how to use the mood, the theme, a theme or a metaphor in trying to create an abstraction, like I talked about the lotus, abstracting. How do you go into abstract? Abstract means, it doesn't mean broken, it just means there will be proportions, but in different proportions. The proportions will be the same, but the sizes will be different. Thank you.